Today, I have two very interesting guests to introduce to you. I have David Mandel, who has worked on Veep and Seinfeld, two of the greatest comedy shows ever, both starring Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She's wonderful.
She is the best. Hello.
Hello, thank you for joining us. And then Ryan Condal, creator of Colony on USA, which is now on Netflix, so you have no excuse.
That's right.
And then also, of course, a little show you might have heard of. It's coming up on HBO. He's the showrunner on House of the Dragon. And I've worked some Game of Thrones questions into this because I'm not crazy. All right, so we're going to have a really good time, but they're here to talk to us about their new podcast, The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. It's out now. The first episode just launched, and it's not only a podcast available wherever you listen to podcasts. It's about movie memorabilia, so we're going to talk about that. But also they have an Instagram account because, of course, you want to look at the movie memorabilia that's being discussed. So you guys have to head over there, follow that, so you can watch along as you listen. So, guys, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You're in the exciting world of podcasting.
Yes, we are. We're it's new to both of us, so it's a strange new world, but I think we're getting along. We're having a good time. I think, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like with like Veep and stuff, I was a guest a lot, and you do it a certain number of times, and at some point you're like, I could do that. Like so you kind of just do it at some point.
So you guys, how do you find time to film? Because I know, David, you're in Los Angeles, yep. And Ryan, you're in London getting ready for House of the Dragon. So yeah. When are you guys filming? When are you guys recording these episodes?
It actually works out well because I'm sort of a ridiculous night owl. So late at night in LA is early morning, and Ryan's a morning guy in London. What? So I actually think we talk more now that he's in London than when he lived in LA 5 minutes from where I live. Yeah. It's sort of funny. It works out time-wise now.
Yeah. You guys are that close to each other in LA?
Well, ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you never know with LA traffic.
Everything in LA is 5 minutes apart. Only it takes an hour.
That's right.
So, guys, as big movie memorabilia collectors, you guys are like serious collectors. For each of you, what is the crown jewel of your collection?
Well, I'm going to say this, and forgive me. I'm not sure I can ever say that there is only one crown jewel. It's sort of like there's always kind of a rotating group of crown jewels, but
what are you in love with now, David?
A crown jewel, and that's being a collector is always having many crown jewels. But I brought one, which hopefully we can stick the picture up. It's a display I have that I made of a hat and jacket from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Indiana Jones's hat and jacket, and they're screen matched, which is something we talk about on the show, meaning you can identify my jacket on camera in the movie.
That's amazing.
And a whip from Temple of Doom. So it's kind of my Indiana Jones display. And
this is just in your home?
Yes,
oh
exactly.
Oh my God.
Yes, covered so that the children don't,
I can imagine. Yeah. So I don't come over there and put it on. I'd be like, oh,
you or them, you or the children. Yes, very similar. So yeah.
Have you ever worn it?
No, I put the hat on. I did.
Okay, that's great.
I put the hat on for like a second because you kind of have to. But yeah.
That's such a cool thing to own. I can't believe it. How many of those are there? How many hats and coats are
there? Obviously there's now 4 movies, although I don't count the 4th one so much. So 3 movies. And each movie, there were, multiples for each movie. Plus what they did was, especially like, if you remember in Raiders, like where he gets dragged by the truck, they would have like the truck dragging one, which is much more beat up than say the one wearing at the beginning of the movie. Well, it's kind of cool if you knew that this was the truck dragging one. So there are multiple ones in the grand scheme of things, but certainly not commonplace, let's just simply say. So yeah,
that's pretty freaking cool. All right, Ron.
Yeah, and there's sort of more as you go along. So as the movies become bigger and have bigger budgets, they make more for the movies.
Like on the first one, they're like, Harrison Ford, don't mess this up.
Yeah. I mean, there were like 2 hats on the first one. There's actually there's a hat out there that's in a private collection somewhere that screen matches to like 80% of the film. So You know,
Wow.
Harrison definitely wore another hat, but he was wearing that one hat for most of Raiders.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So what do you have, Ryan? I know
Well,
you have show and tell.
I'm like Dave. It's very hard to pick your favorite child. You know, it's hard to say the crown jewel. This is very new. This is actually the newest thing that I have, but it's been something that I've been trying to get for like 9 years. So I was very excited to finally get it. So I'm gonna bring it out.
You took it to London with you?
Yes, I did. Of course,
Travels
I did.
everywhere with it.
I need friends. So
Wow.
this is an original Stormtrooper helmet, obviously from A New Hope. So it's from the first movie.
Oh my God.
You can see it's lived quite a storied life. He's balding like many of us, and it's not screen matched, but definitely from the first film. You can see it's got a ton of character, ton of nicks and scratches. It's mostly complete. This guy here, this brow strip was replaced because it had rotted away, and then there's this lens inside that you can see, the kind of green lens in behind the eyes that had fallen out, which happened very commonly with them because it was just kind of stuck in there with hot glue. It wasn't really fixed in for permanence sake. But other than that, it's an original paint job. It's complete. It has these ears on it, which these are separate pieces. They fall off a lot of times. So it's very exciting. It's something that I had a Return of the Jedi helmet.
Hey, Ryan, does it have the foam inside? Does it have foam?
It does not. It is foam free. Yeah, you can see.
And this is like the first helmet they made.
Yeah, chin strap. Yes, it's the very first one.
That's incredible.
So I had a Return of the Jedi helmet like 10 years ago, and was sort of foolishly lulled into the idea that if I found a Conan sword out in the wild, and I had to get it like immediately or lose it, and I needed to raise money, and I was just looking around, and the most liquid thing that I could grab was my Return of the Jedi helmet. And I just figured, hey, there's a lot of Stormtrooper helmets out there.
That's
They
hilarious.
made like 50 of them for Return of the Jedi. Every collector we knew had one. So I was like, I'll sell it, and then next year I'll get another one. And that was 9 years ago. So it just
You're
never
like,
worked
what have I done?
Yes. So I've been relentlessly mocked by not only my wife for not listening to her and selling it, but also by the empty place in my collection that once held the Stormtrooper helmet. So finally this year I was able to get one back, and I think this is actually better because it's first film, so it's original.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
the two things that are really cool about it is obviously number one, he replaced a Jedi helmet with an original Star Wars helmet, but more importantly, I don't have to listen to him whining about how he got rid of his other helmet. So that
Did you know for the whole 9 years, David?
Yeah, collecting wise, that's the most important part of this acquisition. It really makes my life better, finally. So yeah,
we had planned a whole podcast season around my whining, so now we're gonna have to obviously.
You had your own saga, Ryan.
Yes, exactly. It was like a 9-episode saga.
I have a question. With your families, do they also love movie memorabilia, or are they like, this is too much in the house?
love is a very strong word. And actually, one of the ideas that we have for our final episode of the first season. So we're doing 12 episodes, and we've done the first 6 are coming out now that we've made, and we'll start on the next 6. But for the final one, probably number 12, we've been talking about bringing our wives onto the podcast to sort of interview them about what it's like. I think they graciously put up with it is the kindest words I can use. So.
Yeah, I would say my wife kind of finds it sort of a charming tolerance in her life. You know, she's sort of charmed by it at times. She enjoys the fact that I care about something as deeply as I do, other than our children, most of the time. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. She's very good about it. I always say, like, when she met me, I was already a collector. So she had to accept this part of me in order to accept me into her life. I don't think now that I could take up like vintage car racing. I don't think I could like take on another insanely expensive hobby to into our marriage, because I think that would say no, left by the wayside. But the fact that I already had it was a pre-existing condition, I think helps it kind of, you know, it's always been there.
It's part of the whole package when she fell in love with you.
Correct.
I love it.
I was going to simply say that, you know, obviously if you're ever in a you hate to say this, if somebody's ever in like a bad relationship and your spouse is like disappearing at 1 a.m. and you're really worried, like, where are they? Are they having an affair or whatnot? My wife knows at 1 a.m. I'm sitting with 3 very pasty white guys talking about Star Wars, and so she doesn't have to worry about anything.
She's very happy. And my wife knows that I'm one of those pasty white guys.
I'll join. I'll come over. I'm pasty. So Ryan, as showrunner of HBO's upcoming House of the Dragon, are you particularly interested in the production and costume departments?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, I think Dave and I both think a lot about this stuff. I mean, we're executive producers, creators of our shows. This is stuff you're supposed to think about and care about. But I think on a level that's perhaps not taken by every showrunner creator that comes along. Yeah, I do think about it because I collect this stuff. I care about it. I've seen thousands of pieces from friends and other auctions that are made in kind of all different ways, all different styles. When you've picked up a really well made piece that a lot of thought and design has been put into it, and I care on that level. So it's definitely something that I'm thinking about. Particularly on the show, thinking about the swords and knowing how fans love these things. They really care about them. We want to get those designs right, especially for the hero weapons that you're going to see a lot in the show. So I think about that stuff. And then the costumes, that's the wonderful thing about Game of Thrones is like every costume is completely custom made. Like the most quote unquote boring costume on the show is complete, is designed from nothing and made. And I think, when that stuff really works and tells the story that you're trying to tell of this completely, supposedly fully realized world that you're trying to put up on screen, all that stuff goes into together in kind of unison to tell your story. So for me, it's very important. I think a lot about it. I'm very excited by the costumer that we've hired and the production designer that we have. I think the fans will be too, and I think they're going to create some really great stuff for the show.
With the look of the show, will people be able to be like, that's a House of Dragon prop, or is it like seamless with Game of Thrones?
I think so. I mean, as it's common knowledge that this is a prequel, so it takes place some time before the show, but it's on a medieval timeline, right? So not much really changed through the Middle Ages, or took much longer. So 200 years in our timeline is a really long time, whereas 200 years in Game of Thrones world wouldn't be that much. Technology has not improved all that much, but there are things that are going to be different, fashions and things like that. So I think it will be, you'll realize it's very much of the world. Miguel, my show running partner on the show, Miguel Sapochnik, who directed Battle of the Bastards, and, all of the favorite episodes from the original series. His mantra as we go through this: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the costumes, the production design, the art department on Game of Thrones was classic. So we don't want to mess with that stuff too much, but you do have to come out in some way and say, look, this is a different period, and find subtle ways to tell that story without completely upending people and disorienting them and making them feel like they're not in the same world. So that's the creative challenge for us.
Oh, I can't wait. Now, David.
So you're saying the creative challenge is to not be the Star Wars prequels. Got it. Okay, moving on.
Some people really defend
I would someday
days.
like a job at Lucasfilm, so I'm going to say that I deeply love Star Wars prequels.
Those were amazing. All right, so David, you've confessed to finding props on the set of Seinfeld when you were the supervising producer there. What did you make off with?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story, which is on the final night of Seinfeld, we all, Jerry and a bunch of the writers, we were like basically hanging out in the apartment on the set till like, I don't know, I think like 2 a.m. or so, a little drunk, little smoking cigars and stuff, whatever. It was really fun. No one, it was the end and no one wanted to leave. You know what I mean? Yeah. And what the funny part of the story is they had added cameras, like security cameras, to the set during that final season because people were basically walking off with stuff. They actually caught people on the lot who had stolen stuff off the set. So they had these cameras there. So I don't know, it was about 2 a.m. Everybody's very drunk and it was time to go. And we all, just everybody, the writers and Jerry too, we just started taking stuff. Like I had I had it set from the coffee shop of like the plates and like the coffee
You
mugs
do?
from the coffee shop. Oh yeah. We just start grabbing stuff. Someone grabbed the cash register. Jerry, I think, took a door off the hinges. I mean, we just took stuff and we left. And the funniest thing was two things. One, I think the next day, like the producer got like a phone call, like, we need to see this security camera footage. And of course, it's just the writers and Jerry like looting the set. It was just like, yeah, it's fine. But then the funny thing was, years later, when we did the Seinfeld reunion on the Curb Your Enthusiasm season, where we did that in there, like, people were able to like bring back the door and like kind of go like Alec Berg, who was one of my writing partners at the time, took, I think, Kramer's door and like was able to go, yeah, here's Kramer's door if you need it. And it was just really funny. So it was a good thing. Yeah, I just grabbed odds and ends. I've always liked to grab things, especially from my episode. So I did an episode, The Bizarro Jerry. And
yeah, that was a great one.
And in Bizarro Jerry's apartment, he has a Bizarro Jerry statue because Jerry has a Superman statue. And I took that and I had, before we left some point or another, I had all the cast sign the base of it, and I have that. And so things like that aren't just willy-nilly, you know, sort of stealing, but, you know, things connected to my actual work, dare I say.
Well, how do you know, like, besides sentimental value, how would you know if a prop would be valuable? Like, how would you know what to take? If, like, so let's say I found myself on a set and I was like, oh my God, this is it. What should I go? What should I grab?
I will admit, you could probably, there is a way of thinking about that. It's not exactly, you know, I've never been like, I'm going to grab this and sell it. For me, it's always been, I'm taking this, it's from my episode, I'm putting it on my bookshelf. But, you know, I think certainly if you were given a choice between, like, you know, a memorable episode or a memorable prop that like Jerry held up or made a joke about, or something a guy, you know, in the back of the scene was doing, you know, that you can kind of find your way to value in that way but I do not condone stealing. I just want to be very clear about that.
Yes, that's horrible.
We call it liberating in our business.
I like that.
Yeah.
So Ryan, I think that probably one of the most famous props from Game of Thrones has, of course, become the Starbucks cup. Right?
Yes.
How would that be of any value? And how would someone be able to prove that that was the Starbucks cup that was on camera?
That technically, but first of all, that has caused a lot of consternation. I think a lot of people are like haunted and still at night wake up in cold sweats wondering whether they left a Starbucks cup out. So it's been discussed a lot through the Thrones productions. And I mean, that would technically be, I think, a piece of set deck versus an actual prop, because for it to be a prop, an actor has to handle it and make it part of the story. Otherwise, it's just part of the set decoration.
Oh, cool.
I would say at this point that cup would be very, very, very valuable, but you'd have to prove that it was from the scene, which means a screen match, which Dave spoke about earlier. And that means that you would have to have a clear enough image of it on screen where you could see, you know, like the Sharpie name like written on the cup or the lipstick screen, and be able to actually match like the pen strokes to that cup. And now with 4K and everything, this is you know, very doable, and you can get these kind of like smoking guns, like almost like a CSI find for props that, you know, some people have only just screen matched stuff now that they've had for 10, 20 years because of 4K. So because, you know, Thrones was certainly shot in.
Just to give you an example, on that jacket that we showed earlier, the Indiana Jones jacket, it's a leather jacket, but there are like scratches on the leather, and you can freeze Last Crusade and match those scratches. That's how I can go, that is that jacket.
That's amazing.
Like, that's a screen match. And that's one of the real, what's the word? You know, you can always, like, someone can tell you a story, but if you can screen match your prop in your collection, or the one you want to buy, or the one you're thinking of buying, to the movie, you have no doubt about what you're getting if you can do that. You know, then that's always cool. That's the highest ideal that we kind of aim for in the collecting world. That's the easiest way of explaining it.
Yeah, so I would say if you could get a screen matched, if you could somehow screen match that, it would be something of great sentimental value.
Well, the idea of screen matching the name on the cup is pretty brilliant. I was like, how could you tell it was that cup when I was writing that question? And that was a great answer. Yeah. But so now you know, knock on wood, hopefully no one will leave anything on your set, but if they do, you'll know not to throw it away, but to carefully preserve it because it'll now be very valuable.
There's
Like, no one touched that Starbucks cup.
There's something much easier about doing a show in modern times where if somebody leaves a Coke can on their desk during the scene, it's that character was drinking a Coke can as opposed to millions of people, tweeting about it endlessly, kind of a thing. So yeah, there are certain downsides to period and dragons and what.
And to having the most successful show in the universe.
Yes, exactly. And people just being angry at.
Well, I think it was fun. I mean, I think everybody looks back at that as a funny moment.
Yes.
I think it was great. I think it's part of the mythos. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see in Raiders of the Lost Ark, like you can actually see Kathy Kennedy on screen. She was on the film as a PA or Spielberg's assistant. So she was actually helping at some point in the Cairo scenes, like herding extras. So you can actually like catch her. This is part of the fun of movie making.
Yeah.
All the mistakes in like Gladiator and those big arena scenes. There are times when the cameraman catches the other cameraman because they had cameras all over the arena. So you'll actually see there's like a whole bunch of Romans, and then there's like a guy in jean shorts with a bandana on his head.
That's fantastic.
35mm camera. I mean, this is the magic of movie making. The mistakes are part of it. I mean, the stormtrooper that smashes his head on the door in the Death Star when he comes in the room. I mean, these are things that are immortalized in film. There's actually a documentary now where they're actually trying to track that guy down because all these people have claimed to be that guy in the suit. So the documentary is trying to track down and actually prove who, if anybody, this stormtrooper was.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, people love that. It makes it seem human and like you could be on that set. I just think that's hilarious. So, but although speaking of sets, a lot of things are going digital these days. Like, for instance, I think digital has really hurt comic book collecting because all of a sudden you can get any comic you want. So as sets become more digital, do you see less memorabilia entering the marketplace as a result of that?
Well, it's already affected, it's sort of connected to the comic books. It's already affected, I guess, what I would call like production art, like art connected to the making of. Meaning, in the old days, people used to storyboard by hand. They would do, set designs and conceptual art. So like, for example, just again, Raiders or Star Wars, like all of like the Ralph McQuarrie art where he did these paintings and drawings and the Joe Johnston storyboards. These things are being done digital and they're wonderful, but obviously there is now that part of the world you don't collect those things anymore. And same thing on almost like on the B side, the movie poster side, when the movie's done, most of that's being done either with photography or digital. And so nobody's doing those great sort of like movie poster paintings that were also very collectible at some point. I think in terms of the actual movie making, obviously if you're doing a lot of green screens and fake sort of set worlds, you're losing sort of the idea of like, oh, here's a cool piece of the wall or something, that those are things that people could collect. And then the other thing, and this is a little harder to sort of discuss, but they're using computers and those 3D makers to sort of mass produce more identical props that often are more easily destroyed. And so you're getting a little bit less of that kind of handmade kind of, like you're just getting these like sort of 3D printed things and they're just, I don't know, they're less.
They're not as exciting.
Yeah, they're not as exciting. They lack that sense of, oh my God, like on Star Trek, they always talk about like how some of the medical gear were like a salt and pepper shaker that they found. Do you know what I mean? There's less of that, I guess what I would call the creative ingenuity from the prop makers because they're just kind of designing anything they want in a computer and making it. And so again, they're still interesting, but I personally don't find them as interesting.
The found item, I mean, in the original Star Wars trilogy, Luke's lightsaber, the one that Obi-Wan gives him in the hut, is a flash gun from a 1930s camera. It's that they found
literally in a box of camera parts in an old camera store. I mean, that's what it was.
They glued Roger Christian, the art department guy, like glued a bunch of stuff onto it, like T-Track, and a calculator. The bubble strip on the top of a calculator went into the grip. And fans over the years puzzled over this and tried to reverse engineer it and figure out how it was made. But there's just something much more satisfying when you see a Graflex 3-cell, which is what the lightsaber is based on for the first time. You're like, oh yeah, that's Luke's lightsaber with all that stuff glued onto it.
That's fantastic.
There's something incredibly satisfying about that. But now, the modern stuff, it is, if not 3D printed, it's designed on a computer. So it's made there. It feels less kind of.
There's a funny thing
when
people do the sort of the CAD, the CAD, the computer aided design. What ends up happening is everything is perfect. This is my own little theory.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if something's supposed to be a round circle, it's literally a perfect circle, as opposed to if a human being is going to carve a circle, it's going to be off. And there's something when you see something, even if it's imperceptibly a little bit off, it's more pleasing. It's like why I think the Navajo Indians, like put arrows in the rug.
Yeah.
This is not symmetrical. Look at it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
What's wonderful about it. But,
yeah, it's great.
But when they make
real.
But when they make Stormtrooper helmets now, they're computer designed and they're so perfect that there's something off about them. It's that, uncanny valley that they talk about?
Yeah, it's like computer animation versus hand-drawn animation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what bothers me about some of the computer-made modern-day props and costumes. That's the easy way.
One of the things I liked in your first episode, that you guys were kind enough to supply to me in advance, which although it's available now, you said that anyone could get into collecting movie memorabilia.
Absolutely.
So what's a good starter purchase? What could someone go out who listens to your podcast and goes, I want to be a part of this world? What should they look for?
I mean, for me, it's like, what's your favorite movie? I mean, that's the thing is pick the movie that you care. Don't go looking for the prop. Look for the movie that you care about, whatever that movie is. And there's always, I mean, unless you're trying to collect something from like 2001: A Space Odyssey where just nothing exists, there's always something around. I mean, there's, big Indiana Jones fans, there's this upcoming, there's an upcoming auction that has a bunch of great Indiana Jones stuff in it. It's not his fedora and his whip, but there's stuff that Indy himself used in the film.
Cool.
And you can, I mean, that to me, that's, if I didn't have anything indie, that would be great. It'd be like, hey, this is a Harrison Ford jacket. It had a label inside that, from the waiter, the coat that he wore when he was on the Zeppelin. I would be, I mean, I would be totally into that. So I think it's pick the film that you're into, and then find something that when you're flipping through the pages of those catalogs or scouring on the internet or talking to other collectors who might be selling something, what's the thing that excites you? And usually that goes back to, for me, it goes back to a specific film versus being, a piece, just a cool piece from something that I don't care about as much. I mean,
when you come into if you decide I'm going to start collecting, unless, I mean, again, I don't know who you are, but your first piece is not going to be a Stormtrooper helmet. And so if you're looking to sort of test the waters and maybe not spend a lot, there are obviously movies that aren't Star Wars that are still beloved that you can find things from. I'll go one step further. A lot of television often, especially when a show shuts down, will sell off stuff from its show. And often TV just in general is a lot sort of more reasonably priced. And so you might find yourself, and also they make so many more episodes. Right. You might find something that your favorite character from a show, like Breaking Bad, just to pick an example.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just had
exactly. Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. is exactly. And so there's so much stuff. You can find something. You might be able to find a folder that says S.H.I.E.L.D. on it that might actually, and yes, I know it's a paper folder, but if it says if it has the S.H.I.E.L.D. logo on it, but it might sell for $100 or less. And that could be a great first prop in the sense of you love that show. It's clearly from that show. You're buying it from somebody selling it who's authorized to sell it. You get a certificate of authenticity from the show itself. You don't have to worry about it. And you can kind of not break your bank and kind of get into it and then sort of see, how does that purchase make you feel? Do you walk by it and look at it? Do you want more from that show? Now do you want something else? Now do you want to spend a little more? But that's that's how you get
That's
into it. That's
awesome.
what I love about it. Yeah.
Yeah, a friend when I started collecting, it's good collector friend of mine named Tim said I never forgot this. He said, "Buy what you love, and you will never go wrong, and buy the very best that you can afford." And those were his two very simple, his very simple pieces of advice. And his thing is always keeping a very small and curated collection, being patient, waiting for that next thing to come along. But for me, I mean, I've been doing this for 11, 12 years now.
Wow.
I've only ever bought things that I had a like a connection to, that I was really excited about, because then I just felt like I would never really regret it. And things obviously come and go over time, but as long as you're led by choosing it for the right reason, which is having a connection to it, the nostalgia, the memory that you have of that piece, you're never going to go wrong.
Yeah, I was just going to throw in, I've only bought things, and yes, even when we're talking about Star Wars stuff, I've bought stuff from movies I love, Star Wars being one of them, but I've only ever bought things that I've loved. And yes, some of them, I guess, have technically, quote unquote, gone up in value over the, the 15 years 20 years I've been collecting. But that wasn't the point. I was never, how do I say this? If you're looking for an investment, that's a separate thing. That's not us. That's not what we're talking about on our podcast. It's out there. You can do that, but we're not talking about investing. We're talking about collecting. And that, and if you buy something you love, I guess to some extent, who cares if it's worth more or worth less, as long as when you look at it, you like it, or it takes you back to that moment you saw that movie or that show or whatever it was. So that's sort of the advice we try and give.
Well, obviously a lot of movie memorabilia comes from classic films, but sometimes people today don't even want to watch a black and white movie. Why do you think that, classics are such an important part of Hollywood?
Well,
identity.
I mean, for me, Dave and I are sort of from the genre era. So, we grew up in the movies of the 70s and 80s. But what you have to remember is all of the movies that we love, the Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Blade Runner and Alien, those were all made by guys who loved the golden age, that they came up. So Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones was Gunga Din. And that was the thing that he grew up loving, this kind of serial adventure that he grew up loving and he wanted to recreate. So for me, it's going back and seeing all the DNA of that stuff. Blade Runner, Deckard, doesn't exist if Sam Spade doesn't exist, if the Maltese Falcon doesn't exist. So for me, all that, it's like reading your classics, like all the DNA of that stuff, reading Shakespeare, the DNA of all the stuff that you love now is all in that. And it's just as important, if not more important, than the movies that we focus all of our time and attention on now.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was watching Spartacus over the weekend and I realized it's Braveheart. It's the exact DNA. I was like, that's crazy.
Braveheart minus the anti-Semitic guy, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But, as you're saying, though, they build on this stuff.
The interesting thing is culturally, some of these movies, like a Wizard of Oz or a Casablanca, they've transcended the movies. They are part of our culture, and so I think there are some people that maybe even know imagery from these movies in places where they've never even seen the movie. That's how they've entered into our culture. Now, that being said, you do make a great point about it's hard to get people to buy, to watch a black and white movie. And there are definitely wonderful props and costumes from classic films that perhaps are not the Maltese Falcon or Casablanca or Citizen Kane, that you might be quite surprised how reasonably you could acquire something from one of them,
that's interesting,
because they are not quite as in favor as they used to be. Yeah. And there's, again, I'm not talking about it from a perspective of it's a great investment. I'm just simply saying
it's attainable.
These movies come and go. And so, the movie we love right now, maybe people won't care about in 10 years. And so if you are into those classic movies, you might find you can find a lot of stuff that you're looking for, which is a kind of an interesting thing as, quote unquote, the tastes change. Again, very different from The Wizard of Oz, I guess is all I'm saying.
Well, speaking of changes, up until now, movie memorabilia has been things for private collections. You've seen it maybe some theme parks. We're into it for a little while, but the Academy is opening up a museum, hopefully next year. What do you think? And they're going to have movie memorabilia as exhibits. How do you feel about that?
We're really excited. We're both like charter members, and we were both lucky enough to get to go on a little sort of backstage tour of the construction zone. And yeah, it was really cool. We got to sort of see, again, this was not a prop tour. This was more like, this is a room props are going to go in, but it was still really cool. We're big fans. And with any luck in those next 6 episodes, so somewhere between 6 and 12, we're going to get a chance to do an episode with someone from the museum about their collection, and hopefully, as you put it, the museum's opening, COVID willing and all of that. But we are big fans. I think a chance to see, to see other people. I mean, it's not that I feel like I need the hobby to be legitimized, but I think it will be cool for people to get a chance to see some of the stuff, we love. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think to see it treated the way we all kind of treat it in our private homes, which you can't, obviously more limited foot traffic than you'll get at the Academy Museum. But the way, a few years ago when they were first getting it going and getting all the funding, they did a costumes exhibit in the space where they were going to build the museum, and it was just one of the greatest. I think Dave, you and I walked through on the same night. It was one of the greatest exhibits I've ever seen put together. Just the not only the quality of the material, but the ruby slippers were there. 2 of Rachel's costumes from Blade Runner, Sean Young's costumes.
Wow.
But just the way they were presented by professional museum people in museum lighting on custom made mannequins, and just seeing the love and the preservation of that stuff was really exciting to me, because I felt like there's a future where everybody is going to walk through and see this stuff as, this is as important in American culture as the Declaration of Independence is.
One of the great sort of, I guess I'll simply say, America's contributions to world culture is obviously American cinema. And so it is treating the cinema and the objects of the cinema, which are made by these master craftsmen, as the artistic artifacts that they are. And that's something wonderful, to sort of treat something the way they deserve to be treated, and to acknowledge their significance. And that's I think what's really special about it.
So the first episode of your podcast is up right now. What's it about? What can they look forward to hearing about?
We sort of tried to start at the beginning. And so after kind of telling our own sort of how we became collectors and what collecting is a little bit about for us, we kind of dove in with the question we kind of get the most, which is, how do you know it's real? And so we talk a little bit about some of the stuff we were talked about today, like screen matching and searching and checking, and how to sort of, again, because people ask me all the time, like, oh, you have a Stormtrooper helmet. How do you know it's real? And we try and get to the bottom of that question and make people, I think, who maybe don't know about collecting a little bit more comfortable about it. And then also, if you do know about collecting, you're going to know what we're talking about, but we're going to tell interesting sort of bits and pieces of ways we've gone about doing that and things of that nature.
That's a really great distillation of our episode.
That was an excellent answer on my part. Yes.
Well, before we go, Ryan, can you please give us a teeny tiny tease about House of the Dragon?
So I knew this question was coming. I racked my brain. It's very early. There's obviously tons of stuff that I could say. I feel like all of it would get me shot or fired. So I will say this. I realize the shoulders that I'm standing on here and making this show. I realize the footsteps that I'm walking in. They're very deep. They're very intimidating. But look, I come to this show as not only a huge fan of the original series, but also a fan of the books. And I found these books 20 years ago when I graduated college. Lord of the Rings was coming out, and I was desperate for fantasy. And I remember the bookstore or whatever, the first time that I picked up Game of Thrones, the first book in the series, and read it. And I fell in deep love. It was the book that I loved the most, really, since Tolkien. And I've had this affinity for the books really since then. And the reason I have this job is because 8 years ago, when I was making my first pilot, I happened to be making it in Santa Fe, which is where George R.R. Martin lives. And I knew that because I'm a fan and a stalker. And I was out there, and I said to my agents basically, hey, can you set me up for dinner with him? And they did, and he accepted the offer and was interested in meeting me. And we went out and had dinner, and we kind of became friendly, and we just kind of kept in touch. And I was just excited just that this guy knew who I was and was interested in me and my career and whatever. And we stayed in touch over the years, and he knew I obviously, loved his books and deeply cared about them. So I will say I'm coming at this as a fan who deeply, deeply cares about this. And I am doing my best currently and will do my best to service the world, the material that George and David and Dan created, all coming before me. And Miguel and I are really trying to carry on the legacy of the show. So it's not a spoiler, but I'm coming at this, understanding and trying to carry the legacy forward. That is what I consider my job.
I think that's great. I think that's fascinating. You inadvertently planted the seeds to do this show 8 years ago. That just
I
goes to
incepted
show
George.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What a journey it is. But you guys, I think you guys have worked on such wonderful things and are continuing to work on wonderful things. And clearly that's fueled by a love of Hollywood and the stories that Hollywood tells. And I think that's incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And everybody go listen to that podcast and follow along on their Instagram account. Links below in the video description.